Thank you to everybody who's came in today for the January's Parent Engagement Workshop. Today with us here is a certified grief recovery specialist, Shelly Zenteno. She will be talking about suicide awareness, recognizing the signs, and how to get help. I want to also introduce myself. My name is Daniel Talamontes. I work with the DFYinSCV program as the middle school program specialist. I go around all the middle schools talking about the dangers of drugs and drug prevention programming as well in all the middle schools of Santa Clarita Valley. But with that being said, Shelly, if you would like to take the stage. Thank you.
11 minutes. 11 minutes. We lose someone to suicide in America every 11 minutes. This is a heavy conversation. It's a heavy topic. It's deeply disturbing. And I thank you for, being bold enough to sit and listen to it, because really it comes down to awareness and being aware of what is going on in our society right now and with our children. And as a parent myself, I really can't think of anything more frightening and horrific than, this subject matter and facing these sort of things. So every 11 minutes, we are losing someone to suicide in America. In America, we lose 47,000 plus people a year to suicide, and it is the second leading cause of death of our children. It's the second leading cause of death, actually, between the ages of 10 and 34, 10 years old. How I felt about suicide changed in 2017. It had hit our family, and I lost my husband to suicide in 2017. And we became a statistic. And it's just one of those things that once you go through it and come to find out, there's so many people that have been touched by suicide. It directly affects and impacts. Every suicide directly affects and impacts at least 6 people intimately, and becomes often generational. So it is a huge issue, and it is a very important thing to talk about. So we're talking about our teens, as young as 10 years old and even younger, but is the second leading cause of death between 10 and 34. We are dealing with 12 million Americans a year that seriously have thought about it. 3.5 million Americans a year made a plan to do it, and 1.4 million Americans a year have attempted. Those are pretty outstanding numbers. Every time I review them, and it takes me back to kind of how shocking it is that all of us, whether we've experienced it ourselves, whether we have battled it ourselves, or whether we have been touched by it, there's tentacles all around it that I think everybody in some way, shape, or form has been affected in some sort of way, even if it's just through attempts and mental health. Girls are more likely to attempt. Boys are 4 times more likely to complete the act of suicide. And guns are used in more than half of the cases of our youth. Where does this start from? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, this just wasn't something that was really talked about. People didn't, it was just so far out there. And unfortunately, we are in such a new world with social media. It has come right onto our doorsteps, into the bedrooms of our children, of our families and our loved ones. And no more can we do the, oh, you'll be okay and shrug it off thing, because our kids are in a whole new world of pressure, and it's a different kind of pressure. I mean, yes, there has been pressure all throughout, civilization, but the means that they're getting in their undeveloped brains of technology and their brains literally can't absorb it all, and they don't have experience to pull from. As adults, you know, we can go through a hard time and we can know, okay, my past has showed me that, there's roller coasters and it goes up and down. Well, our young people, they don't have that to pull from. They don't have past experience to pull from. And so when we tell them, oh, it's going to get better, they just nod their heads. They have nothing to pull from to say, oh, it's going to get better. And depending on the situation, a lot of our children are coming from, from major grief. And grief is any significant emotional loss. It can be divorce, it could be abuse, it could be trauma, it could be so many different things that our young ones are going through, and from very early on. So their experience could be things don't get better. This is how it is. There's always something. Now we know there's always going to be something. We know that there's going to be these roller coasters in life. And we know that there's really high peaks and really low valleys. But to, our kids, they just don't grasp that. They just don't, they can't. I mean, their brains just can't developmentally grasp that information. So we really have to, as parents, listen to it through new ears. And again, I understand there is nothing more frightening than, possibly your child coming to you and sharing these kind of feelings. And we tend to want to shrug it and say, oh, you're fine. Oh, you're going to be fine. Oh yeah, I've had tough times too. And oh, there's people, worse situations. And we tend to do that because it's so horrific to imagine losing a child this way, that we kind of, it's like it's a denial. We just want to make it better and make it stop and make it go away. But we can't do that. That we just cannot do that anymore. And we have to kind of have a heart with ears. So you kind of step back and think, well, what do we do with this information, and what are the risk factors? There is such a complexity of risk factors. I would love to sit here and say it's XYZ and you'll be able to figure it right out. It's not. It's very complex. You are dealing with, how to determine what is being a regular teenager that's moody versus someone that is troubled and in danger. It is difficult, and it is extremely intentional. It's intentional parenting, and it really requires us to level up in a way that our parents and all the parents before us really didn't have to. And because we have so much working against us with the influences that we do not have a control over. Even if we take their phones away, their friends have phones, and their friends and friends have phones. I mean, so we have to really figure out, how do we work within this and be intentional? And really that is being very present. And before I go into anything more, I do want to just kind of do a disclaimer. Ultimately, we cannot make the choices and decisions of other people. We can help, we can provide resources, we can do everything we can to step in and help and be available. But please know that, we don't own choices, albeit irrational and possibly ill, that someone makes. But we can be intentional and do everything we can, because this is preventable, and there is hope in this, very dark conversation. Some of the various risk factors: addiction, mental health. I believe it's like over 90% of people that have completed suicide had a mental health issue, and a lot of them were undiagnosed. So you have people that are struggling that don't realize that there could be something that could be helping them. And they're thinking something's wrong with them. They're broken. They're a burden. Something's wrong. I'm not getting better. And it could be that they need to be diagnosed. I mean, your brain is an organ. It is an organ like your heart, your kidney, anything else that, and everything starts with your brain. So if your brain is not, it is compromised in some way, there's going to be more struggles, just as with your heart. And you can't tell on the outside. I mean, how many times have we heard about, an athlete that, drops dead of a heart attack, and here they were an athlete, so it's really being very intentional of kind of realizing that there could be more involved of what's going on. So you have addiction, mental health, impulse behaviors. I mean, teens, they don't have great impulse control anyway. Our kids, they just don't. So when we tell them, to have it, they're just not going to. They just lack that ability. They can do it only so much in their developing brains. But you have some that have a little bit more of a problem with impulse control. So, you combine these risk factors of addiction, mental health, impulse, control behaviors, family history, past attempts. If there is a gun in the home, that greatly increases chances of that happening, because it's impulsive. When teens do this, even if they've been thinking of it for a while or going back and forth, it's the access, and it's being so impulsive. So it's really trying to, not have things around. So if that impulsiveness starts coming up, imprisonment, but that could be, that's a lot for adults, and our teens don't really deal with that much, but kind of loss of control, feeling restricted, exposure to suicide. And this, again, it's difficult because we have TV shows, we have movies, there's friends, there's families, there's fiction, there's so many things that our kids are exposed to. And how do you prevent, how do you circle around that? And the best starting place is communication. Having those conversations of talking to them, letting them know that you are there as a heart with ears. Because in my experience of people who have struggled with suicide and suicide ideation, those thoughts, a lot of times of our young people, they don't feel heard. And again, this is not to put guilt and, it's the parents' fault. It's not to do that. The parents play a vital role in it. But a lot of it is just being a good listener. So they know I can go to my parents or a trusted adult, and they will hear me. They won't judge me. They won't get mad at me. They won't make me feel like I'm bad for feeling this way. Because let's just pause for a second. Think about your own life. Think about things that you've had to really push through, that kind of took your breath away and made you feel like you kind of did. Maybe you weren't having thoughts of hurting yourself, but you did have that hopelessness and not sure, can I do this? Can I do this? And sometimes you had to have friends come and circle around you. You could have gone through death. You could have gone through divorce. You could have gone through loss. You could have lost of finances. You could have there's so many things that could have caused just tremendous loss in your life of hopelessness. And as an adult, think of a time where you kind of hit below the trenches and how difficult that was to pull yourself through that. Now, imagine that being your kids and kids going through that. Well, they're so ill-equipped to be able to know how to pull through things like that. Because if you think how difficult it is for us, how much more difficult is that for our kids? And kind of being afraid of authority, not wanting to disappoint. That is a huge thing with our teenagers. They don't want to disappoint us. Even if they're doing things they shouldn't do, like they still don't want to disappoint their parents. And a lot of times they get afraid to speak up because they don't want to worry. They don't want to disappoint. And I know I've had to say flat out to my kids that, hey, I'm going to be more worried if I'm wondering, if I'm having to wonder what's happening and try to read between the lines. That's going to be more miserable for all of us, because we have to be able to trust each other. I have to be able to trust you to be honest with me. And you have to trust me that I'll be honest with you and I'll be there for you. So it really starts with having those conversations, letting them know that you are there, you love them, and in paying attention to what is happening. And again, it's difficult because they're teenagers. So just being a teen, without any issues, they're going to be fluctuating all over the place. And we're going to have drama and we're going to have this. I mean, that's just going to happen. What makes it more difficult now is they turn to social media or the internet and again, you can take everything away from them. It doesn't matter. There's always a way for them to get on the internet and research things. And the internet is not a friendly place for the kids. So they get there and they get more ideas in their head, and something that would have been a normal thing for a teen to go through now becomes so much more magnified and unhealthy, simply because the information that's out there is so much more toxic for their undevelopmental minds. I mean, I'm thinking as an adult, it's really difficult with all the social media stuff and the access that we get. It just all moves really fast. So what are some of the things that, strategies that you want to go through? Some of the strategies to help of prevention would be strengthen economic support. If there's financial issues at home, if you need help financially, reach out and try to really work on getting help in that, because financial security really can contribute to things. It can make kids feel unstable. But so it's important that we are able to communicate things with our kids and be transparent, but we don't need to maybe share with them more than they need to know. There's a lot of things that are just kind of things for adults to take care of, because kids need to know that they're secure and they're safe. Strengthen access to resources. If you are expecting or suspect that your child's been struggling, first talk to them about it and look for resources. And I'll go into more of resources in a bit. You want to create protective environments. If there is weapons at home, they need to be locked and put away. Again, we're talking about impulsive actions that this takes place. And just let you know, that's what it is for adults as well. Again, even if something is planned, the actual act of completing suicide is very impulsive. So that's why having access and means, kind of taken away is, very much a protective measure. We want to promote connections. We've been living in this since 2020. I mean, talk about grief, a sudden change to a familiar pattern. We are all in a sudden change. I mean, these kids, before the pandemic, we were telling all the kids, go outside, hang out with your friends, get off the computer, get off your phones, go socialize and, be young, be free. Well, the pandemic hit and all of a sudden totally changed everything, total opposite. Stay inside, isolate, don't be around your friends, get on the computer, get on your phones. And it was the opposite. So the kids, I mean, I can't even imagine what goes through their head. So there's so much isolation. And then the online school, stuff. And even though, at first, my daughter was like, this is a dream come true, I get to stay at home and be in my pajamas, but then that got tired out pretty quickly. And the thing with school is that, there's the distractions. Even if it's a bird chirping, there's a lot of different things that your brain's able to pick up. Well, when they're isolated, there's too much time in their heads. And so with everything that's going on, we just had just an increase in isolation issues. And when kids are able to be in their minds, all of us, when we get in our minds too much, it's a lot. And so really encouraging connections. And if you're not able to do things, with friends, or they're not able to do things with friends, really trying to implement doing more things together, and finding out who are people they can talk to and engage with, because that's very important. Obviously, teaching coping and problem solving skills. I wish they taught that in school more. Because I just think that is a basic thing that we need to be doing. And we assume sometimes that our kids are going to pick it all up from us, and we're still trying to figure it out ourselves, our own coping skills. But so again, we just really have to be intentional. And you can look at it as a way of the healthier you get, the healthier your kids are going to get. Either way, I mean, even if everything's great in your home, if you're getting yourself better and learning better coping skills, again, even if everything's great, that's only going to serve your child, because they're going to watch you develop the coping skills and they're going to practice that. Identify and support people who could be at risk. And that could be, crisis intervention, the treatment centers that we're talking about, resourcing. And again, obviously lessen things that could be dangerous within the home. You think, what are some of the signs to look for? Oh my goodness, it ranges everywhere, but a lot of it would be sadness, hopelessness, loneliness, declining school performance, loss of interest in activities, changes in eating habits, changes in sleeping habits, too much sleep, not enough sleep, weight change, appetite change, withdrawal from friends and family members, acting out, running away, alcohol, drug use, neglecting personal hygiene, caring, just not even really wanting to do anything, unnecessary risk taking, obsession with death and dying, lots of talking about it, more physical complaints, emotional distress, stomach aches, headaches, extreme tiredness, loss of interest of school, which is a tough one because they're teenagers. So, there's a combination of things that usually go hand in hand with that. Problems focusing, again, feeling like they want to die, lack of praise that they get. They say things like, I won't be a problem much longer. If anything happens to me, I want you to know. They start giving possessions away, start giving things away. They become suddenly cheerful after a period of depression. And that's a scary one too, because you're thinking, if they were in a rut or they were depressed, and then all of a sudden they start feeling good, you need to pay extra attention. So in saying this, and of course, if they express, weird thoughts. And as I say all this, and as a parent myself, you can just sit there and just be thinking with your hands out, like, what will, my kid has a lot of that, or has this, or has that. And, am I supposed to go into a panic? And no, it's not to go into a panic. But I will say, no one really knows your child like you do. And that goes in that gut instinct, and that's being intentional. And I always say, err on the side of caution. I'd rather my child be mad at me than lose them. But if you're having those communications and you're being open, you are reducing the risk factors. So and it's scary because, we have these risk factors, now that we have this in our family, our risk factor has gone up. And so it's being able to just say, okay, we have to have these conversations. And I know they're really uncomfortable, but I want you to feel like you can talk to me, and be able to make the safety plan of who can they talk to, and have lists, because, sometimes, like, it's okay if my kids feel like they can't come talk to me, I want them to talk to somebody. So it's being okay with them being able to have another trusted person they can speak with. In my work of working with people who have struggled with suicide ideation, or the loved ones left behind, the key word that I heard and hear was hopelessness. A lot of it comes down to, because all of those other risk factors and all of those other feelings that they're feeling, it all gets tied into that one word: hopelessness. They need hope. And so when all of these risk factors start happening, or all these feelings start happening, then of themselves isn't such a big thing. But when they add up and it's sudden, like a lot at once, or continues and isn't seeming to end, they get exhausted and they get hopeless. And it's like a hemorrhage. They just start emotionally hemorrhaging and they go into the high executive function of, fight, flight, freeze. And they're not thinking straight. And when I say they, I'm meaning not just our kids, but just anyone who gets themselves into this state. And so much of this is stuff that I wish I had known. I had no idea. I mean, I thought, I guess because it was something that seemed so impossible to happen. I had known my husband since we were kids. I mean, like 13, 15, and we were together for 28 years and married almost 23. So, I mean, there was just no way this could happen. And it did. And I just had no idea of what these warning signs and stuff were, because you just don't think it's ever going to happen to you. Looking back, I can kind of see them, but I had no idea they were the extreme and how dangerous it was. And again, with our teens, it is very complex because teens are just all over the map anyway. What are the things that we can do all the time? All the time is keep medicines and guns away from children and teens. I mean, that's just a given. They shouldn't have access to that anyway. And remove the temptation. Remove it from that impulsive moment. Something goes on at school, something goes on, a major change or something happens, they get impulsive. So that should just always be taken care of. Get your teen help for any mental or substance abuse problems. And again, there are resources for that. Support your teen. I always say, have a heart with ears. That's what it is. You're listening. And I'm telling you, sometimes I feel like I have to do this, just cover my mouth, like if my kids are talking to me, because I want to just start giving my opinion and pulling on all of my, I remember when, Well, then it becomes about me. So it's really important that when they're talking to us, yes, it's good to bring in the relatability to some things, but it's also really important to remember it's about them. And it's different because that's what it is. When they battle these things, they're grieving something. They're grieving something is hurting inside of them, and they're grieving, and grieving is individual. It's as individual as a fingerprint. So even if your child is going through the exact same thing you went through, they're going to go through it differently because they're an individual person and they bring up their own history and their own story along with it. So we can't assume, well, I went through this, so they're going to be able to get through that. It's just different. So it's really being a heart with ears, listening, letting them know that you're there, and asking, how can I help? You want to, again, when you have these conversations with your kids, if your kids are showing and are saying these things and you're in that situation where you're definitely noticing something is off, something's wrong, and you have to ask those questions. And sometimes we're afraid to ask. And I'm saying all this, even knowing what I know, it is very difficult to be in this position, to have these conversations. And so if you notice your teen going through these things, having the conversation of, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? Like I know, are you depressed? Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? Are you scared right now? If they say, yes, I am, then you like, yes, I am thinking of hurting myself. Then you follow it up with, do you have a plan? And do you feel like you can do something to yourself today? So you have to be able to ask those questions and listen and not get angry. And it's so emotional, and do not leave them alone. So depending on how those ask those questions, then you don't leave them alone. And if it's immediate crisis, then you call 911. For an immediate crisis, you call 911. We do have the national lifeline that's 24/7, and I can give that number. I'll give it now, but we can always give it at the end as well. But it is 1-800-273-8255. 8255, and that is the National Lifeline. And they're very good at being able to handle these moments and resource you. And this is important for caretakers too, because if you are struggling with someone in caretaking and taking care of them, and as a parent, you're a caretaker. But if your child has been struggling significantly, then you've been even more in a caretaking role, and your well-being is just as important. So it's so important that you are able to have support, and these resources can also help support you. And again, creating a safety plan, having your kids write down, 3 solid names other than you that they can talk to in case there's an emergency, and every emergency does not mean they're going to go to this. Suicide ideation builds. With adults, it builds more over time. With our kids, because they're more impulsive, they can go from like 0 to 10 really quickly. And again, that's what makes it, the second leading cause of death. But it is preventable. So I want to give you the hope in that, because it's scary. It is absolutely terrifying. But the hope is we have such the capability to have so much more conversations with our kids, and, in a way that we maybe didn't have with our parents, that we can just be really open and transparent, and not be so uptight, and just kind of listen to them and let them vomit it out. Because a lot of times they really do feel better when they do that. They really do feel better. You get to, again, just maybe start doing a little bit more stuff together, and not giving so much isolation time. And that means that is where we are accountable as parents, of putting ourselves in it, a little bit more. And as I say that, I know these are anxious times, and, and that's why I said, as the disclaimer kind of in the beginning, that even though we are parents and we do the best we can, we can't make the choices for our kids. And I think that's probably one of the most frustrating things is, we just see our kids making choices and decisions, and, they're little people, and they're going to do that. So all we can do is really do our best, and our best is being informed, educated, being able to take, some breaths in and out, you to be able to have support, you to be able to have parents, people to talk to, because as you have these conversations with your kids and they unload and you just turn extremely anxious, you need to have your safety plan. You need to have, a good trusted friend that you can talk to and say, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going through. And you need to have your own circle to help you. And because look at it this way, we need to circle around each other, and as a community and parents and resources, like circle the wagon train, because out there is the internet, out there is pressure, out there is a world that is really big, that is coming right into your living room and your kid's bedroom. We have to circle around each other and help each other through this. And we got to get rid of that stigma of mental health. And I like to look at it as brain health, because again, it's the organ of the brain. So we need to remember that this is not, there could be other factors involved, but we got to keep our brains healthy, just like we keep our hearts healthy. And sometimes that means, again, removing ourselves from isolation and doing things that start, bringing hope and bringing plans and bringing things where kids can start looking forward to something, instead of being so stuck, in their mindset and garbage that just kind of gets filtered in by really no fault of their own. So again, I know it's very heavy to have this kind of conversation, and I always try to bring as much hope as I can with it, because there is hope. And but with that being said, I'll kind of open it up to questions or comments and feedback. So I don't know if who gets the questions to be able to see.
So if anybody has any questions, does anybody wants to type type in the chat, and then I will ask the questions for you. Yi Jin says, will a recording of this lecture be available online later? Yes, we will make sure to post it online, and it will be available on the DFYinSCV website. So let me type that here. And I would type the URL in the chat. And you can check our website for when it will be posted. Does anybody have any questions on the presentation? Renee asks, since teens separate and go into their caves, how can we separate that teen behavior from really being concerned?
Yes, excellent question. And that's something that I've done with too, because they do. You said absolutely right. They go into their cave. And as much as solitude is good, because solitude, especially if they're, introverts, it's good for them to have their kind of quiet time. But I would encourage them to do that more out in the living room. If they want to be on their phones, that's fine. But be in the living room, be in the kitchen, be with them, and they might be annoyed. They might be annoyed at that, but they kind of have fun with it, and just, wrap your arms around them and, make a funny face and give them a big, huge hug and just say, I love being around you. Oh my gosh, and they'll be like, oh, leave me alone, and they'll do all of that. But what they're feeling is they're feeling that connection. They know they're wanted. They know you're there. And it's just those little things instead of just kind of being like, oh, whatever. So it's, it's okay to be annoying. It's okay to have fun with your kid and your teen. Have fun with your teen again. What a novel idea. I mean, my daughter hates it when I'm dancing in the car. She absolutely hates it. But I'm going to continue to do that, because if I get really quiet, because she's like, can you just be normal? And so then all of a sudden, I just hold the steering wheel, I get really quiet, and I'm like, I get real serious. And she's like, so stop it. And I'm like, well, so you don't want me to be that way. So those memories of keeping things light and having fun and just being kind of silly, it's okay to do that. It's okay just to knock on their door for no reason and just run in there and just give them a big, huge hug and have them think that you are annoying and you're a freak. That is okay. Those are good things to do.
Okay, so we also have a question from Jody. And Jody has asked, do you have resources for families who have been affected by suicide?
Yes, there are. Well, first I would say if you do call the National Lifeline crisis line, they will, and they'll look for places in your area. We do have places here. A lot of them could be, there are like grief share. I do one-on-one grief work, and, I never thought I would be specializing in survivors of suicide, but I do. It's a total different, I never would have thought I would have been in this situation, but I will say, that's one reason why I got into doing what I do, because being in that despair of it's a loss like nothing ever experienced. And being able to get out of that, I just knew that I needed to go back and go in those trenches with people, because there is also hope for you if you are a survivor of that. And so, yeah, but there are ways that we can contact and email, and whether it's me or a lot of different other people, there are resources for that. And I think it's very important for survivors of suicide to speak and get help, because it is something that, someone told me, you're never going to be happy again. And that was just the worst thing anyone could say. And I'm here to tell you, you can be happy again. And it'll be a new kind of beautiful. And so I just think it's really important for survivors to know that as well.
For Jody's questions, also bounce off of that, would I be able to share your information with them so that you can exchange any resources that they may need?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. If you would you mind if I put your information in the chat box, or
No,
do you want me to
fine.
directly? Okay, I'll put it there. We also have another question. it says, I may be off topic here, but I feel that suicide prevention goes beyond the teenage years. I see in the news and hear from other parents of suicides of college students. Would you say it's a buildup from their teenage years? I hope my
Oh,
question makes sense.
yes, it makes absolute sense. And the thing is, when we talk about grief, again, when I say grief, a lot of times people think of death, but grief is over 43 different types of losses. And so it could be loss of trust, it could be neglect, it can be, emotional abuse, a loss of safety, divorce, traumas. I mean, there's just so many losses that we can start experiencing early on in life. And if they are not resolved and worked through in a healthy way, they just get carried with us. And so, yeah, so if they make it through the teens, it extends into their college years and adult years. And so a lot of times your adults that are dying this way are really grieving a whole bunch of hopelessness and despair that has been carried with them since their childhood years. And granted, I mean, that, and if they have a mental health on top of that, or physical health, there's lots of different, and that's something we can't put people in little boxes. Everybody has an individual story of why they get to that. But yes, it absolutely gets carried with them. And that's why there's, when people talk about prevention and hope, I feel so strongly that we got to get them here. We got to get our kids. We got to get into our elementary kids. I know that's horrifying. You're thinking, oh my gosh, elementary kids. Yeah, you do. We need, someone said, as our kids get older, it gets easier. Are you kidding me? It's a whole new bucket, when they're older. And that's when my knees drop to the floor of worry for my kids. So yes, it absolutely does carry. Everything that I said of prevention, everything I said of warning signs absolutely applies to adults as well.
I have another question, and the question is, are there any low-cost resources where teens can find therapists or counselors to speak with?
Yes, again, I would start with the National Suicide Line. And in our area here, I do know that there are treatment centers that do offer help for things like that for our teens. So that is information that can be given. I don't know how you guys do that with companies and organizations. And therapists, your insurance, if you have insurance, what's nice about, even if you have an HMO insurance, this is something I found out recently, from my understanding, you don't need approvals for mental health, the behavioral health with HMO. Like all your other doctors for physical, medical, you usually have to get a referral from your doctor. Well, with behavioral health, you call the number and it's self-referral. So if you do that, I would say, if you have insurance, put your little card over on the back, look at behavioral health, mental health services, call that number, and they're really good with, listening and working on helping you start taking those next steps.
And then I have another question. The question is, are there free resources available? And then the second question is, are there resources available at the schools?
The schools, yes and no. I think you could always go to the counselors at the schools, and they usually have a school plugged in with school counselors throughout the district. But they only help at kind of certain times of on school hours. But that is also a really good place to start, because the staff or the counselors there may already kind of know your student, know your child. So starting from there, they can do that. But the free resources, that's one thing that, has frustrated me so much about mental health, is that, we keep telling everyone, get help, get help, get help. But it can be very expensive, and that's so unfair. So yes, there are avenues for that. And you could even start with a church. If whether you go to church or a church in your area or a place of faith, you could even reach out to them and say, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. This is our situation, because they usually have lots of resources, and they have people who maybe in the church that have offered their services. So they've let the church know, hey, if anyone comes to you, I'm a psychologist, but I also kind of do this, and I have a sliding scale. So whether you're a person of faith or not, churches are and places of faith are a resource, and they're starting to get much better in this area to really kind of reach out and be there for the community.
Heather wants to also add that it might also be faster to ask for an outside referral for mental health if going through your insurance. If you want to speak a little bit about that.
Yes, because with mental health, time is of the essence in a lot of ways. So I think that's what's nice about it being self-referred versus having to go through all the referral stuff. But even with HMO, if you call them, you can self-refer. They'll show you how to do a printout with whether you need a psychiatrist, psychologist, a group center, and they will, with your zip code, they'll plug you into that area, and then you can call directly those providers and just confirm they still take that insurance, and then you can just start the process right there. If money is an issue, again, there is city help. You can go to the behavioral units. You can call your local behavioral units at the hospital. Like Henry Mayo has a behavioral unit, and you can ask them, where can I go? So it's I do understand the expense behind it, but what I can say, you just got to keep pushing and asking the questions and just saying, hey, I need help. Hey, I need help. And you're going to find someone that's going to be able to work with that.
Awesome. Are there any more questions from any of the participants? Okay, all righty. For those who have possibly missed, I have I'm going to post again Shelly's email so that you can contact her just in case you want any information or any more resources. It's going to be in the chat box. I'm also going to be posting again the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline if you want to use that, or if you need that for any of you who may need the phone number. I'm going to be posting it in the chat as well. I think there are no more questions. Thank you so much, Shelly. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, I know it's heavy, and it can be very overwhelming. And I guess my best advice also to the parents is take a breath for yourself, because you know what, our kids really do learn from us. And again, the healthier we get, the better they see us taking care of ourselves. That's just more things that we can do to teach them how to make themselves as a priority.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all this information, I'm getting so many thank yous and saying that this is so important. And I really, really do agree that this topic has been super, super impactful to the participants, and is going to be super, super impactful to the people around them. So we thank you so much for your time and all the information that you've given us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.